Dear all viewers, you're listening the Alpha's King love story. In that story, you will enjoy a lot of thrilled, love, and more interesting ending. Before starting story, please subscribe my channel because your one like and subscribe means a lot to me. And after it, please share your thoughts on comments. And if you like the story, so share it with your circle as well. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1: The Second Theft. They say lightning never strikes the same place twice. They lied. My name was Elara Gray, and I learned the hard way that blood isn't always thicker than water. Sometimes it's just the weapon used to drown you. I watched my sister, Celeste, the radiant jewel of the Moonstone Pack, steal my first love with a smile that didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. I thought that was the deepest pain a soul could endure. I was wrong. The day the Alpha King arrived, a storm of power and silent fury, I felt the pull in my very bones. I felt the destiny thread weave between our souls. But as I watched Celeste glide forward, her golden hair catching the sun like a crown she hadn't yet earned, to claim him too, my world shattered for the second time. In that moment, crystal clear and bitterly cold, I realized I had only two choices: stay and let my heart turn to dust under their combined disdain, or vanish into the shadows so deep not even the monsters dared to linger. This is the story of how I disappeared, and why the king, in his silent, terrifying wrath, would later scorch the earth to find the whisper that got away. In the strict, unyielding hierarchy of the Moonstone Pack, there were alphas, there were betas, and then there was me, buried beneath the suffocating weight of expectation and disappointment. I was Elara Gray, the alpha daughter of the Pack Alpha. It sounds like a cruel joke, doesn't it? An alpha's daughter born with the spirit of an omega. Biology, it seems, has a vicious sense of irony. While my sister, Celeste, presented early, a glorious, powerful she-wolf with a coat like liquid sunlight and a voice that commanded rooms, I remained small, quiet. My wolf, Lyra, was a faint, timid pulse in the back of my mind, a secret I kept even from myself. My father, Alpha King Gray, never raised his voice to me. He never had to. His dismissal was in the way his gaze slid over me as if I were a pane of glass, in the way he addressed every comment about me to my mother. He didn't hate me. I was simply irrelevant. My mother, Luna Isolde, was a different kind of chill. She treated me like a smudge on the family legacy, a flaw in the perfect portrait. Stay in the West Wing during the gathering, Elara. She had instructed me that very morning, her voice crisp and final. The delegates from the northern clans are arriving. We cannot have you unsettle the atmosphere. Your sister needs to shine. I had merely nodded, my eyes fixed on the intricate pattern of the rug. Yes, mother. I was 20 years old. A part of me knew I should have felt rage, should have demanded my place. But fury is a fire, and I had been starved of fuel for so long I was just embers and ash. The only warmth in my cold existence was Kieran Vale, the Pack's future beta. He had kind hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners, and a laugh that felt like the first day of spring. We grew up as shadows in the same halls, finding solace in quiet corners. Late at night, when the pack house slept, we would meet beneath the ancient weeping willow by the lake. He would hold my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm, and make promises that felt like armor. Just a little longer, Elara, he had whispered only a week ago, his breath warm against my temple. Once the beta ceremony is done and the title is officially mine, everything changes. Rank, status, none of it matters to me. I choose you. I will always choose you. I clung to those words. I wrapped them around my soul like a shield. Tonight was the beta ceremony. Tonight, Kieran would pledge his loyalty to the pack and its future, and he had promised, with a solemn vow, that his first act as beta would be to ask me for a dance in front of everyone, a small, defiant declaration. Of course, I wasn't supposed to be in the grand hall, but I had to see it. I had to witness his moment. I slipped in through the servant's entrance, a ghost in a simple gray dress, and hid behind a massive stone column draped with the pack's banners. My fingers were clenched around a small wooden box. Inside was a pendant I had carved from a piece of riverstone, a simple, smooth wolf howling at a crescent moon. It had taken me months to get the shape just right. The music swelled, a grand, sweeping symphony. The chandeliers blazed, casting 1,000 diamonds of light across the room. And there he was, Kieran. He stood tall and proud in his formal attire, but I saw the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes scanned the crowd. Looking for me, I thought, with a flutter of hope. Then the great oak doors swung open. Celeste entered. She didn't walk, she made an entrance. Her gown was a cascade of silver and sapphire, cut to showcase every graceful line. The air itself seemed to part for her, the crowd drawing a collective breath. She moved with the innate confidence of a queen surveying her kingdom, a slight, knowing smile on her perfect lips. She glided not to our parents, not to greet the elders, but straight toward the center of the room, straight towards Kieran. My heart, that foolish, hopeful thing, began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. Kieran, I pleaded silently, pressing myself against the cold stone. Look away, remember your promise, find me in the shadows. But Kieran's eyes were glued to her. As she neared, his expression shifted from nervousness to a dazed kind of awe. Celeste stopped mere inches from him. She reached up, not for a handshake, but to gently adjust the lapel of his jacket, her fingers lingering. I saw her lips move, shaping words meant only to him, and then I felt it, a shift in the atmosphere, a sudden cloying sweetness that cut through the scent of pine and perfume. It was her pheromones, but amplified, twisted. It wasn't the natural scent of a wolf. It was something engineered, overpowering. Kieran's eyes glazed over. He blinked slowly. "Kieran!" The name tore from my lips before I could stop it, a desperate, breathless sound. I stepped out from behind the column. The music faltered. 100 pairs of eyes swiveled towards me. I saw my mother's face pale with horror. My father's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek. Celeste turned, oh so slowly. Her smile widened, but it never touched her ice-blue eyes. "Elara, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with false concern. "Did you get lost? The kitchen is the other way." A few nervous titters rippled through the crowd. Heat flooded my cheeks. I ignored her, my gaze locked on Kieran. I took a step forward, then another, my legs trembling. "Kieran," I said again, stronger this time, "you said, you promised." For a heartbeat, a single, glorious, agonizing heartbeat, I saw him. I saw the boy from under the willow. Recognition flickered in his haze, his lips parted. Then Celeste's hand tightened on his arm, her nails dug into the fabric of his sleeve. A flash of something dark, something that wasn't just shadow but a tangible violet energy sparked in the depths of her gaze. It was gone in an instant, but Kieran flinched as if struck. When his eyes met mine again, they were shuttered, cold. "Elara," he said, his voice flat, unfamiliar, "this isn't the place. You're causing a scene." The words were physical blows. I felt them in my stomach, in my throat. My knees threatened to buckle. "But I made this for you." My voice was a broken thing as I held out the wooden box, my hand shaking violently. Celeste plucked it from my grasp with elegant fingers. She opened the lid, glanced at the humble riverstone pendant, and let out a light, tinkling laugh that felt like shards of glass. "Oh, how rustic." She snapped the box shut. "Really, Elara? A pebble?" With a careless flick of her wrist, she dropped it into a nearby vase overflowing with white roses. "Remove her," Alpha King commanded, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. 2 guards materialized at my sides, their grips firm and impersonal. As they hauled me backward, my feet scrambling for purchase on the polished floor, my eyes met Celeste's. There was no sisterly rivalry there, no petty jealousy. There was only pure, unadulterated triumph, and beneath that, a chilling emptiness. She didn't want Kieran. She wanted me to not have him. The distinction was a knife to my soul. That night, locked in my room, a beautiful cage, I stared at the moon through my window and let the final piece of my naivety die. As long as I drew breath within the borders of Moonstone, I would be a toy for Celeste, a whetstone for her cruelty. She had stolen my love. She had stolen my dignity. She would not get my life. I packed a single bag with practical things: warm clothing, a water skin, a hunting knife, and a small, tarnished silver locket. It held a tiny portrait of my grandmother, the only person who had ever looked at me and whispered, "You are more than they see, little moonbeam." She had passed when I was 12, and with her the last flicker of unconditional love in my life. I climbed out of my window, down the familiar lattice of ivy I had used for secret meetings with Kieran. I didn't run toward the rogue territories. That was a death sentence for an Omega. Instead, I turned my steps toward the one place the pack folklore warned against, the only place even our boldest hunters avoided: the Vale Falls. A monstrous curtain of water on the northern frontier, bordering the haunted Blackwood. Stories said the caves behind the cascade were filled with the echoes of wolves who had lost their minds, their spirits forever trapped in the roar. A place of madness. Perfect, I thought, a strange, detached calm settling over me. I've lost everything else. My mind seems a fitting thing to sacrifice. With one last look at the pack house lights glittering in the distance, a place that had never been a home, I walked into the relentless mist of the Vale Falls. I let the thunder of the water swallow my footsteps, my scent, my very existence. Elara Gray, the Omega daughter, the disappointment, the ghost, vanished into the roar. Chapter 2. The Whispering Caves. Time, I discovered, is not a river but a cavern. It echoes, it stretches, it collapses in on itself. 2 years passed in the belly of the Vale Falls, measured not in seasons but in the slow drip of water from stalactites and the growth of moss on sunless stone. The pack surely believed me dead, eaten by beasts, claimed by the river, or simply erased. They were wrong. The caves behind the falls were not haunted by mad spirits. They were a fortress, a labyrinth of ancient tunnels carved by forgotten waters, slick with perpetual damp, humming with the endless, deafening song of the cascade. That roar was my shield. It masked my scent, drowned out any sound I might make, and vibrated in my bones until I almost forgot what silence felt like. I was not the same girl who had crept away in the night. Survival is a harsh but thorough teacher. The frail Omega body, weakened by what I later realized were subtle suppressants in my food, a discovery that explained years of fatigue and Lyra's silence, hardened. My muscles grew lean and wiry from climbing treacherous rocks and navigating dark passages. My senses, no longer dulled, sharpened to a knife's edge. I could hear a fish break the surface of the underground pools, smell the faintest bloom of fungus in the air, see the subtle shift in air currents in total blackness. But the greatest change was within. Freed from the chemical shackles and the crushing weight of disdain, my wolf, Lyra, finally stirred. She didn't erupt in a blaze of power. She uncurled slowly like a flower in a hidden glen. The first time I shifted, alone in the deepest chamber where the waterfall's roar was a distant thunder, I wept. My wolf was small, yes, delicate of bone, but her coat, it was white, a white so pure it seemed to glow in the scant light, like captured moonlight given form. In all our pack's history, in all the stories, a white wolf was a myth, a ghost, a bad omen. I understood then why my family had feared me, why they had tried to keep Lyra dormant. I was an anomaly, a living superstition, so I kept her a secret even in my solitude. We ran only on the darkest nights under the blanket of the new moon, through the dense, silent borders of the Blackwood. I gave myself a new name, a suit for the echoes of my existence. Aria. I had carved out a precarious, peaceful rhythm. I foraged, I fished in the icy pools, I spoke to the walls and imagined they answered. The loneliness was a constant ache, but it was a cleaner pain than the betrayal I had left behind. Until the day the forest held its breath. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air tastes of wood smoke and decay. I was on a high ledge behind the eternal curtain of water, checking my fishing lines. Suddenly, the world went mute. The birdsong ceased, the chattering of squirrels vanished, even the insects fell silent. The air grew thick, heavy, charged with a static that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. A cold dread, deeper than any I'd felt in the caves, slithered down my spine. I peered through the shimmering veil of the falls. On the riverbank below, a convoy of vehicles arrived, not the pack's rough terrain trucks, but sleek, armored black SUVs with tinted windows that gleamed like insect eyes. Emblazoned on their doors was a sigil I knew only from whispered tales, a stylized mountain peak encircled by a crown of stars, the Royal Guard. My blood turned to ice in my veins. The royal family never left their distant capital of Astral Peak unless the matter was one of war or of ultimate judgment. The door of the lead vehicle opened. A man stepped out. Even from this distance, high above and hidden behind a million gallons of plunging water, his power hit me. It wasn't a wave, it was a change in atmospheric pressure. The world seemed to tilt, to focus on him. He was impossibly tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in simple but impeccably tailored dark gear. His hair was the color of a raven's wing, his posture one of absolute, unthinking authority. But it was his aura, even muffled by the falls, that stole the air from my lungs. It was the scent of ancient pine forests after a lightning strike, of ozone and cold stone and immutable strength. King Cyrus Thorn, the alpha of alphas, the silent storm. Rumors painted him as merciless, a ruler who governed with an iron will and a gaze that could freeze fire. He was unmated, it was said, because no she-wolf could withstand the sheer, silent intensity of his presence, the crushing weight of his wolf's regard. What was he doing here? I watched, frozen, as my father, Alpha Kalin, hurried forward, bowing deeply. My father, who seemed a giant in my eyes, looked diminished, almost frail beside the king's silent majesty. "Your Majesty," Kalen's voice carried up, strained with surprise. "We were honored by your message, but we did not expect you until the winter conference." "Plans change," the king's voice. It was a low, resonant baritone that vibrated through the rock beneath my hands, cutting through the waterfall's roar as if it were nothing. "There have been disturbances, energy signatures near your borders that concern my seers." He paused. His head lifted slightly, and he sniffed the air, a hunter's gesture. My heart lurched violently against my ribs. The waterfall masks my scent. It has to. "And," the king continued, his voice dropping into something even more dangerous, "my wolf tells me there is something else here, something unique." His head turned, his gaze, eyes of a fierce molten gold I could see even from here, swept across the cliff face. They passed over the trees, the rocks, and then stopped. They locked directly onto the shimmering wall of water that hid me. I stopped breathing. "Just the mist from the falls, Your Majesty," a
A new voice interjected, smooth as silk and twice as false. Celeste emerged from the group of pack members, a vision in hunter green that complemented her golden hair. 2 years had only honed her beauty into something sharper, more weaponized. On her arm, looking hollowed out and pale, was Kieran. My breath caught at the sight of him. His eyes were downcast, his shoulders slumped. The vibrant, kind boy was gone, replaced by a shell. Celeste wasn't just his mate, she was his keeper, and she was draining him dry. King Cyrus, Celeste purred, executing a flawless curtsy that was both respectful and subtly provocative. She released her scent then, that same cloying, artificially sweet cloud. It wafted up, faint but detectable, and my stomach turned. She was trying to ensnare the king, right in front of her own tormented mate. King Cyrus Thorn looked at her. He did not smile. He did not blink. He regarded her as one might regard an interesting but mildly unpleasant insect. "You smell of ambition," he stated, his voice devoid of all inflection. "It is a loud scent. It drowns out all else." Celeste's flawless smile froze on her face, a flicker of genuine shock, then fury flashed in her eyes before she banked it. "Where?" Cyrus asked, turning his dispassionate gaze back to thy father. "The other one." Kaelin blinked. "Other one, your majesty?" "The registry," Cyrus said, the word a soft threat. "It states the Alpha of Moonstone has 2 daughters, twins." My father paled. "Elara," he swallowed. "She is lost to us, your majesty. 2 years past. She was an Omega, fragile. She wandered into the Blackwood. We found only scraps of her dress." "Lost," Cyrus repeated. He took a step, not toward my father, but toward the base of the cliff, toward the hidden path that led up behind the falls. "And my wolf insists the registry is correct." He took another step, his movements fluid and predatory. He was coming. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. If he found me, he would drag me back into the light, back to Celeste's smiling malice. I would be exposed, a freakish white wolf, a political embarrassment, or a curious trophy. I scrambled back from the ledge into the deeper darkness of my caves. I had to get to the unstable tunnels, the ones that plunged into the heart of the mountain. But in my blind heist, my foot dislodged a stone. It was a small sound, a mere clatter. But in the wake of the king's words, in the absolute focus of his power, it was as loud as a gunshot. There. The single word was a growl that didn't sound in the air, it resonated in my skull, an alpha command woven with sheer will. Before I could even process it, a blur of black and gray shot up the cliff face. He wasn't taking the path, he was climbing the sheer, wet rock, fingers and toes finding impossible purchase, moving with a speed that defied nature. He was a storm coming for me. I ran. I didn't think. I shifted mid-stride, my bones reforming in a flash of pain and light, and Lyra burst forth. My small, white wolf hit the stone floor running, a pale streak in the gloom. Behind me, I heard a sound that was more vibration than noise, a deep, seismic roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Mine. The word exploded in the cavern, not through my ears, but in the very center of my soul. It was a possession, a verdict, a truth so fundamental it bypassed all thought. It wasn't a question, it was the Alpha King stating a fact of the universe, and he was coming to claim it. Chapter 3: The Chase in the Dark. The familiar damp smell of moss and mineral water was now tainted with the pursuing scent of pine and lightning. Lyra raced through the darkness, her white paws a silent whisper on the slick stone. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, each beat screaming, "Run! Run! Run!" But the command woven into that single word, "mine," lingered in my muscles like a sedative.
My limbs wanted to lock, to obey, to present myself to the predator at my heels. I fought it, forcing Lyra onward, our shared panic a bright, sharp flame. He was not running. He was hunting. The sound of his pursuit was not the frantic scrabbling of a chase, but the steady, relentless rhythm of a predator who knows the prey is already caught. The heavy, measured impact of enormous paws, the scrape of claws that sounded like steel on granite, the ever-growing tidal wave of his scent, it all spoke of inevitability. I knew these tunnels like the lines on my own palm. I knew where the floor dropped away into nothingness, where the ceiling was fragile, where a subterranean river cut a treacherous path. I headed for the chasm, a deep black fissure crossed by a single narrow ridge of natural stone. It was my last desperate gambit. If I could cross it, I could trigger a collapse on the far side, sealing the way. I burst into the vast cavern that housed the chasm. The air here was colder, smelling of deep earth and void. The stone bridge, glistening with phosphorescent fungus, spanned the abyss like a fragile thread. Without hesitation, Lyra leapt onto it, her claws skidding for purchase on the slimy surface. Stop! The command was a vice around my mind, a collar snapping tight. It was not shouted, it was implanted, an alpha order of such sheer, absolute authority that my body betrayed me utterly. Lyra's legs locked. Momentum carried my white wolf forward, but her paws slid out from under her. I felt the sickening lurch as we went over the edge of the narrow bridge. There was no scream. There was only the rushing wind of the pit and the blinding terror of the fall. I flailed, a streak of white tumbling into the black. But the impact never came. A massive hand, not a paw but a human hand, shot out from the ledge above. It closed around the scruff of Lyra's neck with unerring accuracy, arresting our fall with a jolt that rattled my teeth. We were hauled upward, dangling like a kitten, and then slammed against a hard, warm human chest. The world righted itself. I was held aloft, my wolf form held firmly but not cruelly against him. King Cyrus Thorn stood balanced on the very edge of the abyss, having caught me mid-air with impossible strength and reflexes. He had shifted back. He was bare, his skin sheened with a faint glow in the cavern's dim light, every line of him speaking of predatory grace and raw power. He was magnificent and utterly terrifying. His molten gold eyes burned down at me, the pupils wide and dark in the gloom. He didn't speak. He simply looked. He studied my white fur, his gaze tracing the lines of my form with an intensity that felt more intimate than a touch. He brought me closer, his other hand coming up to cradle my head, his fingers sinking into the thick fur at my neck. A shudder ran through him, a full-bodied tremor that vibrated into me. I have traveled the length of this continent. I have stood before wolves of legend and power, but I have never, never seen a wolf like you. You are starlight given form. You are a silent song. His words, so unlike the cold ruler from the riverbank, disarmed me. Lyra, traitorously, let out a soft, involuntary whine, a sound of profound relief and recognition. The mate bond, the one I had tried to outrun, surged between us, a golden, humming thread of fate that was now pulled taut. It was undeniable, overwhelming, 1,000 times more profound than anything I had ever mistaken for love with Kieran. Shift. The command was there again, but softer now, layered with a compelling request. Let me see the woman who houses this wonder. I shook my wolf's head, a frantic negative motion. I was naked beneath this fur, vulnerable. Cyrus seemed to understand.
Without releasing me, he moved with a predator's economy. He had retrieved a small pack from somewhere, his discarded gear perhaps. From it he drew a folded square of dark, soft fabric, a thermal blanket. "I will not harm you," he said, his voice low and steady, the kingly authority tempered into a promise. "Shift, cover yourself. We must speak." And then he did something that shocked me to my core. He turned his back. He presented his unprotected back to a wild, cornered wolf he had just hunted through a mountain. It was an act of supreme confidence, or of profound trust. He knew I could not run. He also somehow knew I would not attack. Trembling, I focused. The shift was harder this time, strained by fear and the lingering echoes of his command. Bones realigned, fur receded, skin prickled with the chill of the cave. I gasped as I reformed, collapsing onto the cold stone on my hands and knees, shivering violently. The dark blanket was placed beside me. I fumbled for it, wrapping the surprisingly warm material around my body, cocooning my body. It smelled of him, pine and ozone. "I am decent," I whispered, my voice a raw, used thing, scraping against the silence. Cyrus turned. When his eyes found mine, the air in the cavern stilled. He stared, his gaze a physical weight, tracing the dirt on my face, the scars on my arms from 2 years of wilderness, the wild tangle of my hair. But most of all, he stared into my eyes that, like my sister's, were a familial shade of storm gray, but which he looked into as if seeing a new color. "You," he breathed, the word filled with a depth of emotion that made my breath catch. I lifted my chin, a spark of defiance reignited. "I am not dead. I was just erased." He took a step closer. The space between us crackled with energy. "Why did you run from me? Did you not feel the bond, the pull?" "I felt it," I confessed, my own voice barely a whisper as I pressed back against the cold cave wall. "You are the Alpha King. Your mate must be a queen, a warrior, a leader, a symbol. I am an Omega who eats raw fish in the dark and talks to cave walls. I am a shadow. I am not what a king needs." Cyrus closed the final distance in a movement too fast for my eyes to follow. He didn't grab me, he simply stood before me, his presence an impassable wall. He leaned down, his face inches from mine, and inhaled deeply at the curve of my neck and shoulder. A low, visceral rumble sounded in his chest.
"Do not," he growled, the sound vibrating through my very bones, "presume to tell me what I need. For 10 years my wolf has been silent, a void. I have met duchesses and generals, healers and seers. He ignored them all. Today, when your scent first touched the wind, he howled. He howled so loudly I thought the mountains would crack." He pulled back just enough to lock his fierce gaze with mine. "You are my fated mate, Elara Grey, and I am taking you from this tomb." "I have no home to go to," I said, the bitterness a familiar acrid taste. "Moonstone is not my home. It is my execution ground, just a slower one than this chasm." "Not Moonstone," Cyrus said, and a dangerous, possessive light ignited in his golden eyes. "My home, Astral Peak. But first," his expression hardened into the mask of the king. "First, we go back down. We face the man who lied about your death and the sister who wears deceit like perfume." Dread, cold and sharp, lanced through me. "No, you don't understand. Celeste, she's not just ambitious, she's dangerous. She has a way of twisting everything. She will find a way to destroy this, to destroy us." Cyrus's hand came up, startlingly gentle. He brushed a strand of dirty hair from my forehead, his thumb lingering on my cheekbone. His skin was fever warm against my palms.
Rest, my silent song, his voice a vibration against my ear. Your running is over. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was a fool, but the solid reality of him, the undeniable rightness of being held against his chest, the exhaustion of 2 years of solitude and the terror of the chase, it all crashed down on me. A warmth I had never known seeped into my frozen bones. Against my will, against all reason, my head nestled into the crook of his neck. His scent enveloped me, and the world, for the first time since I could remember, felt safe. The darkness, when it came, was not of fear, but of surrender. Chapter 4: The Return of the Ghost. Sunlight was a physical shock, a blinding blade after the perpetual twilight of the caves. Cyrus carried me through the thundering curtain of the Vale Falls as if it were mere mist, his body a shield against the crushing water. I kept my face buried against him, the roar deafening, the cold spray a stark contrast to his heat. When we emerged onto the sun-drenched riverbank, the silence that followed was louder than the falls had been. The pack, the royal guards, everyone was exactly where we had left them, frozen in a tableau of shock. Cyrus stood, water streaming from his hair and clothes, holding the pack's supposedly dead Omega daughter wrapped in a royal thermal blanket. The first sound was a choked gasp. "Elara!" My mother, Luna Isolde, stood with a hand pressed to her mouth. Her face was the color of chalk, her eyes wide with a horror that had nothing to do with concern for me and everything to do with the scandal, the exposure. "Impossible," Alpha Kalin breathed, taking a stumbling step forward. We held a funeral. The river took nothing from her but her trust," Cyrus's voice cut across my father's, booming with a finality that brooked no argument. "Your daughter has been surviving in the caves behind this waterfall, hiding from the very pack that should have been her sanctuary." He let the accusation hang, his gaze sweeping the assembled Moonstone wolves. The unspoken shame that an Alpha's daughter would choose such a feral existence over her own home colored the air, a palpable stain on my father's leadership. Then Celeste moved. She didn't look shocked. Her eyes, those chips of ice, were calculating, rapidly assessing the new board. Her gaze darted to Cyrus's neck, checking for a mating mark. Finding none, a subtle tension left her shoulders. She manufactured a perfect mask of overwhelming, tearful joy. "Oh, thank the great moon!" she cried, her voice a masterpiece of trembling emotion. She rushed forward, arms outstretched, tears already glittering on her cheeks. "Elara, my darling sister, we mourned you. We thought you were lost forever." She reached for me. A growl erupted from Cyrus, not loud, but so low and visceral it seemed to still the very flow of the river. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated warning. Celeste's hand froze in midair, inches from my arm. "Step back." Cyrus did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "But, Your Majesty," Celeste sobbed, the picture of wounded devotion. "She is my twin, my flesh and blood. I have wept for her every night." She turned her tear-filled eyes on me, and in their depths I saw the hidden message, sharp as a dagger. "Play along, or I will make what came before seem like a kindness." "Elara, tell him how much we loved you. Tell him how much you missed us." I looked from her face to the figure standing a few paces behind her. Kieran. He looked worse up close. His skin had a gray, waxen quality. Dark circles bruise. Chapter 5: The Curse of the White Wolf. The silence on the riverbank was thick enough to choke on. Celeste's false tears seemed to hang in the air, waiting for my response. I looked at her, at the cunning buried beneath the performative grief, and then past her to Kieran. His hollow eyes were fixed on me, not with love or recognition, but with a dazed, sickly confusion. He looked like a man watching a ghost, a terrifying one. "Celeste," I said, my voice still raspy but clear, cutting through her theatrics. You didn't mourn me. You buried an empty casket and celebrated. A collective intake of breath from the pack. Celeste's mask slipped for a microsecond, revealing a flash of venomous rage before she plastered the sorrow back on. The grief, it has made you bitter, sister. I understand. And what about him? I gestured weakly toward Kieran, my hand tightening in the blanket. What did your grief do to Kieran? He looks like a shadow. Kieran has been inconsolable, Celeste cried, moving to stand beside him, placing a proprietal hand on his arm. I saw her fingers dig in just slightly. Kieran flinched, a full body shudder that had nothing to do with the cold. We have all suffered, Elara, but now you're back. We can heal together as a family. Her eyes pleaded with the crowd for understanding, then swung back to the king, brimming with manipulative hope. Your Majesty, please let us take her home. She needs proper care, familiar walls. She is coming with me to Astral Peak, Cyrus stated, his tone leaving no room for debate. Tonight.
The finality of it jolted the scene into motion. My father, Alpha King, finally found his voice, stepping forward with the bearing of a man trying to reclaim control of a sinking ship. Your Majesty, with all respect, the mate bond is sacred, but she is an omega. The customs, the protocols for a royal mating. The Council of Elders will have questions. Her suitability. Cyrus's gaze slid to my father, and Kaelin seemed to shrink under its weight. Fate does not consult your customs, Alpha Grey. She is my fated mate. That is the only suitability that concerns me or the moon. Wait! Celeste's cry was sharp, desperate. She wasn't giving up. She stepped closer. This time her gaze locked on Cyrus with an intensity that bordered on disrespect. Your Majesty, you cannot take her, not yet. She took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself, playing her trump card. Look at her, truly look at her. Her eyes, they are our family's gray, but her wolf... Cyrus went very still. I felt the shift in him, the predator's focus sharpening. Her wolf is a miracle, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Is it? Celeste challenged, turning to address the pack as much as the king. Her voice took on a resonant storytelling quality, weaving a tapestry of fear. Legends of our pack, ancient stories passed down from shaman to shaman, speak of the white wolf. They do not speak of it as a blessing. She paused, letting the dread build. They say a white wolf is a vessel, a conduit for the void spirits that linger in places like the Blackwood, in the caves of the Vale Falls. It is not a wolf of flesh and blood, but a hollow thing filled with the whispers of the dead. The pack erupted in nervous murmurs. Superstition was a deep-rooted weed in our culture. The elders nodded gravely, their faces etched with sudden fear. Superstitious nonsense, Cyrus scoffed, but I felt his arms tighten around me a fraction. Is it? Celeste pressed, her eyes blazing with feigned conviction. Ask her where she has lived for 2 years, the caves behind the Whispering Falls, the very place where the barrier between our world and the spirit realm is thinnest. She hasn't just survived there, she has been steeped in that energy, absorbing it. She turned her pleading gaze back to Cyrus. Your Majesty, if you bond with her, if you bring that emptiness into the royal bloodline, what sickness might you unleash? What darkness might root in the heart of the kingdom? The legends are clear. A white wolf is a curse. I am not a curse. The words tore from me, stronger than I felt. I am a wolf just like you. My wolf is white, yes, but she is mine. She is good. Then why, Celeste said, her voice dropping to a sinister, pointed whisper, can Kieran even look at you? All eyes swung to Kieran. He was trembling violently now, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed to eat him from the inside. He looked at me and a choked sound escaped his lips. Demon, she's
She's not Elara. It's a demon wearing her skin. My heart, which had begun to tentatively thaw in Cyrus's arms, shattered anew. This wasn't just rejection, it was a fundamental unmaking, crafted by her. I saw it then, the faintest flicker of purple at Celeste's fingertips, pressed against Kieran's wrist. She was pulling the strings, feeding his fear, making him her puppet to condemn me. Cyrus's entire body went rigid with contained fury. I do not fear spirits, and I do not govern by nursery rhymes. I am the king. My word is law. We must have a purification, an elder stepped forward, wringing his hands. Alpha King, I beg you, the legend, it is old but it is persistent. A white wolf is an omen of ruin. For the safety of your people, for the stability of all our packs, let our shaman examine her. If the spirits are clean, take her with our blessing, but to take a potentially cursed mate to the heart of our world, the risk is too great. He looked down at me. I could see the conflict in the tight line of his jaw, in the slight narrowing of his eyes. He didn't believe the stories, but he was a king, and a king could not be seen to recklessly ignore the deeply held fears of his subjects. To do so would be to invite dissent, to weaken his rule from within. He had to be seen as just, as rational, even in matters of the heart. His gaze was an apology and a promise. One night, he declared, his voice cutting through the murmurs. She remains in the Moonstone pack house, under the guard of my personal detail. No one enters her room, no one leaves it. If she is unharmed and unchanged by morning, we depart at first light. That is my final word. Celeste bowed her head, hiding the triumphant gleam I knew would be in her eyes. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your wisdom and your caution. No, I whispered into Cyrus's neck, my fingers clutching at his shirt. Please, don't leave me here. She'll find a way. She always finds a way. He shifted me in his arms, his lips brushing my forehead in a gesture so tender it stole my breath. She cannot touch you, he murmured, his words for me alone. My guards are sworn to me, their loyalty unbreakable. They will let no one pass. I must go to my communications gear, contact my council and prepare them, and I must silence these poisonous rumors at their source. You are safe, Elara. Trust me. He was wrong. He thought in terms of guards and doors and royal decrees. Celeste thought in terms of poison and secrets and the dark spaces between rules. He was playing chess. She was already several moves ahead in a different, dirtier game. Reluctantly, he set me down on my feet, keeping a steadying hand on my elbow until he was sure I wouldn't fall. My royal guards, two immense, silent men with the king's star and mountain sigil on their uniforms, materialized at my sides, with a final, lingering look that promised fire and retribution if any harm came to me. Cyrus turned and strode toward the royal convoy, his aura of stormy authority parting the crowd. I was led away, back towards the pack house I had fled 2 years ago, a prisoner returning to her old cell under a new gilded pretext. Celeste watched me go, and her smile, now that the king's back was turned, was a slow, cruel thing. The game was not over. It had just become infinitely more deadly. Chapter 6: A Poisoned Gift. The guest suite they placed me in was the finest in the pack house, a cruel parody of hospitality. Silk drapes, a bed large enough for 5, a fireplace crackling with cheerful warmth. It felt like a gilded cage. The 2 royal guards, introduced as Torin and Rohan, took their posts outside the door with a silent, immovable finality. I heard the heavy lock slide into place from the outside. I paced, the plush rug muffling my steps. The silk nightgown they'd given me felt alien against my skin, which had grown used to rough-spun wool and animal hides. Every sense was on high alert, straining against the oppressive quiet. The pack house, once familiar, now felt like a stranger's den filled with unseen threats. Then, a sound. Not from the door. A faint, rhythmic tap, tap, tap at the window. My heart leapt into my throat. I crept over, peering through the glass. There, clinging to the ivy outside, was Kieran. His face was pale in the moonlight, but his eyes, for the first time in 2 years, they held a sliver of clarity, a desperate, pained awareness. With trembling hands, I unlatched the window. He tumbled inside, landing in a crouch, breathing heavily. "Kieran, how did you get past the guards? The grounds are watched." "Shh," he hissed, putting a finger to his lips. His eyes darted to the door, wide with fear. "I don't have long. She's distracted, arguing with your father, something about the king's demands." He grabbed my hands, his own ice cold and shaking. "Elara, listen to me. You have to get out. You have to tell the king everything." A wild hope flared in my chest. "You remember? You know what she did?" Tears welled in his sunken eyes. "Not everything. It's foggy, like a nightmare you can't wake from, but I remember enough. She found something years ago in the deep woods, a book, old, bound in leather that felt wrong. She's been using it. Blood magic, Elara. That's how she bound me to her. That's how she controls the pack's perception, twists their thoughts. It's not just pheromones, it's something darker." The confirmation of my deepest fear was a cold splash of reality. "We have to expose her. Cyrus will know what to do." "We can't." Kieran's grip tightened painfully. "If we try, she'll know. The magic, it's tied to me. She can unmake me with a thought if I betray her." A sob racked his thin frame. "But I can't let her do this to you. Not again." He released one of my hands and fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a small, opaque glass vial. It glowed with a sickly, phosphorescent green light, pulsing faintly like a diseased heart. The sight of it made my stomach turn. "She gave me this," Kieran whispered, thrusting it into my hand. The glass was warm, unnaturally so. "She told me to slip it into your water before dawn. She said it's a powerful sedative, that it will make you appear unstable, that the king will see you have a fit of madness and reject you as unfit." His voice broke. "But I know her lies. This isn't a sedative. It's wolfsbane essence, concentrated and laced with something else, something magical. If you drink it, it won't just make you sick, it will sever your connection to your wolf permanently. It will make you a hollow, a wolfless human. And then the king would have no choice. A hollow cannot be a queen." Horror washed over me, cold and suffocating. To lose Lyra, it would be a fate worse than death. "Why are you giving this to me?" I breathed. "Because I love you," he choked out, the words raw and true, cutting through the magical fog that clouded him. I never stopped. The magic, it muffles my mind, but it can't kill my heart. It can't erase what we were. He pressed the vial into my palm, closing my fingers around it. "Take this, show it to the king. It's proof of her malice, of her use of forbidden arts. It's your weapon." He looked at me, a fleeting moment of the old Kieran shining through, kind, desperate, brave. He squeezed my hand once, a final, heartbreaking gesture, and then he was moving back to the window. "Don't trust anyone, don't drink anything, wait for the king." And then he was gone, melting back into the night. I stood there, clutching the vile vial, a maelstrom of emotions tearing through me. Hope, terror, pity, rage. He had risked everything to give me this. It was my chance, my proof. I turned toward the door, ready to call for Torin and Rohan, to demand to see Cyrus immediately. The door opened. But it wasn't the guards. Celeste stood in the doorway, elegant in a silk robe, a serene smile on her face. The door closed softly behind her. There was no sound of a struggle from the hall. My blood turned to ice. I quickly hid the vial behind my back, clutching it so tightly I feared the glass would crack. "Did you have a nice little reunion with your old flame?" Celeste asked, her voice a soft, poisonous purr as she took a step into the room. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my efforts to steady it. "The king's guards are currently enjoying a very potent, very magical draft in their evening tea," she finished, examining her perfect nails. "They'll wake up with quite a headache, believing they simply dozed off. Men are so suggestible." Her eyes lifted, sharp and knowing to mine. "Now about that little gift Jace gave you." My breath hitched. She knew. She had orchestrated this entire thing. "Give it to me," she said, holding out her hand, her smile never wavering. "No, this is proof. Cyrus will see it for what it is." Celeste laughed, a light, chilling sound. "Oh, my naive little sister. Jace didn't break any spell. I sent him. I commanded him to give you that vial." She took another step closer. "That isn't just proof of my supposed crimes, Elara. That is wolfsbane essence, yes, highly illegal, instantly recognizable by any royal enforcer, and it bears my magical signature, a signature I can make appear or disappear as I choose." She pulled a small black remote from her pocket and clicked a button. A panel on the walls slid aside, revealing a hidden screen. It flickered to life, showing a live feed of another room, Cyrus's temporary study down the hall. He was there, pacing before a fireplace, his expression tense, speaking into a communication device. "Here is the choice, Elara. You drink that vial, right now. You make yourself violently, obviously ill. You become a pitiful, unstable creature in the king's eyes, a liability, a broken thing tainted by addiction. He will be forced to leave you here. Or," she raised her other hand, her fingers poised to snap, "I will snap my fingers, and the compulsion knot I have tied around Kieran's heart will tighten, and then pop."
She smiled, a grotesque parody of sweetness. Such a tragedy, the grief-stricken Beta, so overcome by the return of his lost love and her subsequent madness, his heart gives out, a clean, magical death, untraceable. So, what will it be, sister? Your doomed future as a queen, or the life of the boy you once loved? I looked at the screen, at Cyrus, my fated mate, my storm, my impossible sanctuary. I looked at the vial in my hand, glowing with its malevolent green light. I thought of Kieran, of the brief, clear-eyed courage he had shown, of the life he was living as a puppet. Celeste had crafted a perfect trap. If I exposed her, Kieran died. If I didn't, I would be sacrificing myself, my bond, my wolf, and any chance of a future with Cyrus. Tears blurred my vision. There was no winning move, only a choice of which heart to break. "You swear you'll leave him alone?" My voice was a broken thread of sound. "If you drink it, he is of no further use to me. He can live out his days as the hollow shell he is," Celeste said dismissively. "Now, decide." With a sob that tore from the deepest part of my soul, I uncorked the vial. The smell that wafted out was acrid, metallic, and deeply wrong. I didn't let myself think. I couldn't. I tipped it back and swallowed. The liquid was fire and ash and freezing cold all at once. It burned a path down my throat and then exploded in my stomach. A scream lodged in my chest, unable to escape. I dropped the empty vial, hearing it shatter on the floor like the sound of my own breaking. My knees gave way, and I crumpled onto the rug.
agony. It was a cleansing, scouring fire in my veins, seeking out the connection that bound me to Lyra. I felt her, my beautiful white wolf, howl in terror and pain within me before her presence was violently muffled, shoved into a dark, silent corner of my mind. The world grayed out at the edges, my muscles seized, I writhed, clawing at the rug, a silent, suffocating scream locked in my throat. "Good girl," Celeste's voice came from 1,000 miles away, filled with vicious satisfaction. "Now, lie there, look tragic, broken, mad." I heard her walk to the door, unlock it, and slip out. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was the hidden screen and Cyrus still pacing, unknowing, in his room down the hall. The night was an eternity of silent internal torment. I drifted in and out of consciousness, racked with pain, my body drenched in cold sweat. The bond with Cyrus, that new golden thread, was still there, but it felt distant, muted, as if I were hearing his song from deep underwater. I was alone, truly alone. Lyra was gone. Chapter 7. The King's Judgment. Dawn came, a gray light seeping into the room. I lay on the floor where I had fallen, paralyzed by residual agony and a despair so complete it felt like a physical weight. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. Then the door exploded inward, not opened, exploded. The solid oak splintered with a deafening crack, torn from its hinges by a single devastating kick. Cyrus stood in the wreckage, backlit by the hallway light, a vision of unleashed fury. His golden eyes scanned the room and found me. In an instant, he was at my side, dropping to his knees, his hands hovering over me as if afraid to touch. Elara. My name was a raw, gut-wrenched sound. What happened? He roared the last words, a sound of pure alpha rage that shook the very foundations of the room. "Healer! Get a healer in here now!" "Oh, moon goddess, no!" Celeste's voice, perfectly timed, filled with theatrical horror. She appeared in the shattered doorway, a hand clasped over her mouth. Jace stood behind her, his face blank. "Elara! I knew she was fragile, but I never thought. The shame must have been too much." "Liar! Liar! Liar!" The words screamed in my mind, but my lips could only manage a pained whimper. My eyes sought Cyrus's, pleading, begging him to see the truth. Cyrus looked from the glass to me. He leaned down, inhaling near my mouth. The scent of wolfsbane was unmistakable, a bitter, poisonous signature. His expression, which had been fury and fear, shifted. The fury remained, white-hot and deeper, but the fear, it was joined by something else, a devastation so profound it made my shattered heart ache anew. He didn't believe Celeste's story, not fully, but the evidence before him was damning. "Get out." The words were a low, deadly growl, more terrifying than his roar. "Your Majesty," Alpha Kalin stammered, appearing behind Celeste. "If she is an addict, if she is this unstable, Pack Law Section 7 clearly states she is unfit for a royal bond. The Council will demand—" I said, "Get out." The command was layered with such alpha power that the walls vibrated, paint cracked. My father, Celeste, Jace, everyone in the hallway staggered back as if struck by a physical force. They fled. In the sudden, ringing silence, Cyrus gathered me into his arms. He was trembling, a fine, constant tremor of rage, and something else. Betrayal? Grief? "Why, Elara?" he whispered, his voice breaking as he cradled me against his chest. "Why would you do this? I saw you in the caves. You are a survivor. You are strength itself. This is not you." I looked up into his tormented golden eyes. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream Celeste's name, explain the trap, save Kieran. But the memory of her poised fingers, the threat of that magical snap, sealed my lips. If I spoke, Kieran died for certain. My silence was the only shield I had left for him. Tears, hot and hopeless, spilled down my cheeks. I closed my eyes, unable to bear the pain in his gaze. I wanted him to let me go, to leave me in the ruins of my own sacrifice. But the Alpha King did not let go. I felt movement, the rush of cold morning air, and then the powerful thrum of helicopter blades. He had carried me straight out of the pack house, past everyone, into a waiting royal aircraft. He settled into a seat, holding me tightly against his chest as the world fell away below. "Hold on," he whispered into my hair, his voice a vow against the engine's roar.
The flight was a blur. I faded in and out, aware only of his solid presence, his scent, and the unyielding grip of his arms. The poison had done its work. Lyra was a faint, fading echo. I felt hollowed out, a shell. I awoke in a room that seemed spun from light and air. The walls were pale gray stone, one entire side a seamless sheet of glass, looking out over a breathtaking vista of jagged, snow-capped mountains piercing a sea of clouds. Astral Peak. The bed was vast, the linens impossibly soft. The air was clean, scented with alpine herbs and something faintly electric. Cyrus's scent embedded in the very stone. I tried to sit up, but my body was leaden, uncooperative. Easy. He was there, sitting in a chair by the window, silhouetted against the majestic view. King Cyrus Thorne in simple black trousers and a linen shirt, his hair tousled, dark stubble shading his jaw. He looked exhausted, ages older than the fierce hunter from the caves. He'd been watching over me. How long? My voice was a dry rasp. 4 days, he said, standing and moving to the bedside. He didn't smile. He looked at me with an intensity that searched my soul. Your royal physicians had to purge your blood 3 times. The wolfsbane was laced with a magical inhibitor. It was meant to do more than sicken you. It was meant to destroy your bond to your wolf. He paused, his jaw working. You almost died, Elara. The confirmation was a dull blow. I was afraid. Do not. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the mattress, caging me in with his presence. His gaze was unflinching. I saw you face a cliff edge. I saw you survive alone for 2 years. You are not a coward. You are not a creature who chooses the easy silence of poison. His voice dropped, becoming lethally soft. Who forced you? I looked away, my throat tightening. No one. It was my choice. I'm broken, Cyrus. You should send me back. I'm no use to you or your kingdom like this. The words were ash in my mouth. Never, he growled, the sound vibrating with a finality that shook the room. You are my mate. Broken or whole, you are mine. But you need to understand what has happened while you slept. He straightened and walked to a console, retrieving a sleek tablet. His expression was grim. Your sister, he said the word with icy disdain, has been industrious. She has given interviews to the pack news channels. She has painted a tragic picture, the unstable, drug-addicted Omega, overwhelmed by the prospect of royalty, attempting to end her life. And she has positioned herself as the responsible heir, the strong twin, willing to step forward and support the crown in this time of crisis, even offering to serve as a liaison to Moonstone to ease the transition. He showed me the screen. There was Celeste, dressed in somber, elegant attire, sitting for an interview. She looked mournful, dignified, responsible. Kieran was a silent, pale statue in the background. The headline read, "A Kingdom's Tragedy, the Omega's Fall and a Sister's Duty." She's coming here, Cyrus said, his voice flat. Tonight, for the winter solstice ball. She claims it is to visit you, to reconcile. She is coming to campaign for your position. She can't. The protest was weak but fierce.
She can, Cyrus said, his eyes hardening, because until I officially mark you and declare you before the entire gathered court, the Council of Elders is concerned. They see the evidence, they hear the rumors of the cursed white wolf and the suicide attempt. They are pressuring me to consider other, more stable alternatives. They believe you are a liability. He looked at me, and the mask of the king slipped, revealing the man beneath, the man who had climbed a waterfall and chased me through the dark. Elara, I do not care about the council. I would reduce this mountain to gravel before I let another take your place. But I need to know what enemy I am fighting. My head physician is the best in the world. He found traces in your blood, not just of poison, traces of a compulsion spell. Someone didn't just give you that vial. Someone made you drink it. He had found it. The truth was clawing its way to the surface. I looked at him, at the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, and I knew I could shield Kieran no longer. If Celeste was coming here, she was coming to finish what she started. My silence would only get us all killed. If I tell you, you must promise me something. You cannot harm Kieran. He is a victim, more than I was. Cyrus's eyes narrowed, but he gave a single sharp nod. I swear on my crown I will spare the boy, but the sister, she belongs to me. I took a shuddering breath, the truth a painful liberation. She has a book, an ancient spell book. She uses blood magic. She has been using it to control Kieran, to influence the pack. She threatened me. She said if I didn't drink the poison, she would stop his heart with a snap of her fingers. She made him bring me the vial. It was all a trap. For a long moment, Cyrus was perfectly still. The air in the room grew cold, charged with a deadly calm. Blood magic, he repeated softly. The words hung in the air, a death sentence. That is a crime against the moon herself, punishable by eternal exile to the void. He moved then, coming to sit on the edge of the bed. He reached out, his hand surprisingly gentle as he cupped my cheek, his thumb wiping away a tear I hadn't known I'd shed. The contact sent a weak but unmistakable spark through the numbness inside me. "Get up, my queen," he said, a feral, determined light igniting in his golden eyes. "We have a winter solstice ball to attend, and a snake to skin." Chapter 8. A Gown of Starlight and Steel. The solstice ball was a viper's nest draped in silk and glittering light. The grand hall of Astral Peak was a cavern of crystalline beauty, its vaulted ceiling reflecting the light of 1,000 candles like captured stars. But beneath the elegant music and the swirl of rich perfumes, the air hummed with a different energy, the sharp metallic scent of ambition, the low thrum of speculation, the silent clash of wills. I stood on the mezzanine balcony, a specter behind a waterfall of midnight blue velvet drapes. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in a cage of ribs, but my hands, folded before me, were steady, cold. Cyrus had not just brought me to the ball, he had armed me. The royal stylists had descended upon me. They did not try to hide the scars on my arms from 2 years of survival. They dusted them with a subtle shimmer, turning marks of hardship into tracings of starlight.
Then Cyrus turned his full attention to Celeste. He held her broken wrist, her body contorted in his grip, forcing her to her knees on the cold marble before me. The hall was frozen, a breath held. Cyrus looked at me, his fierce gaze softening into something solemn, reverent. "My queen," he said, his voice resonating in the absolute silence. "The crime is blood magic, treason, and attempted harm to the royal mate. The judgment is yours." All the anger, the years of pain, the terror of the caves, the agony of the poison, it surged within me. I looked down at my sister, kneeling in the ruins of her own making, hate still burning in her eyes. She expected death. She wanted it, to make her a martyr in her own twisted narrative. I knelt too, bringing myself to her level. The crowd gasped.
I reached out and, with a tenderness that shocked everyone, including Celeste, I brushed a strand of golden hair from her tear-streaked, furious face. "Do it," she hissed, her breath coming in ragged pants. "Kill me. Show them all how the pure white wolf sheds blood. Become the monster they fear you are." I searched her eyes, looking for any remnant of the sister I might have played with as a child before the rot set in. There was none, only a bottomless void of spite. "No," I said, my voice low, final. "Death is a release, an escape. You do not deserve an escape, Celeste." Her bravado faltered, confusion flickering in her eyes. "You wanted to be royalty," I continued, rising to my feet, my voice gaining strength, ringing out for all to hear. "A true crown is a tool for service. A true queen protects. A true queen purifies." I looked down at her once more. "I strip you of your rank. I strip you of the gray name. I banish you not to death, but to the life you so desperately sought to avoid." I turned to Cyrus. "Let her be taken to the barren expanse, beyond the silent mountains. Let her live among the rogues and forgotten ones, with no title, no name, no magic. Let her try to rule there, with nothing but the emptiness inside her to keep her company." Celeste's face crumpled, not in grief, but in utter, soul-deep horror. The barren expanse was a wasteland of rogues and outcasts, a place of perpetual struggle. For a creature who lived for luxury, manipulation, and stolen power, it was a fate far worse than a quick, clean death. "No! Father, please!" Alpha King Gray looked at his daughter, the golden child, the vessel of all his hopes. I saw the devastation in his eyes, the realization of his own failure, his blindness. Then, with a sob he choked back, he turned his face away. He did not speak. "Take her," Cyrus commanded, his voice cold as the mountain peaks. The royal guards moved in, clamping magic-suppressing cuffs on her wrists. As they dragged her, screaming and begging from the hall, her cries echoed off the stone, a fading testament to her ruin. The heavy doors thudded shut, sealing her fate. The silence returned, but now it was a different silence, cleansed, awed, heavy with consequence. Kieran stumbled forward, then fell to his knees before me, his head bowed. "Elara, I have no right to ask for anything, no right to even speak your name. I was weak. I let her in. I failed you in every way a soul can fail another." His shoulders shook with silent sobs. The anger I'd held for him was gone, washed away by pity and a profound sadness. He had been a victim, yes, but he had also been a vehicle for my pain. Forgiveness was a distant country I could not yet see. "You were spellbound, Kieran. The fault is not your own. But the boy I knew under the willow is gone, and the girl who loved him is gone too. We are both survivors of the same storm, but we are not in the same boat anymore." I placed a hand on his head, a brief, impersonal touch. "Go home, rebuild your life, find your strength again for yourself." He looked up, his eyes ravaged but clear. He nodded, the understanding a painful wound. He bowed deeply, not as a lover, but as a subject to his queen. "Long live Queen Elara," he whispered, the words a final farewell. Then he rose and walked away, a free man walking into the ruins of his life. Cyrus came to stand beside me, his presence a solid warmth. He offered his arm. I took it, my fingers trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. He led me to the center of the floor, turning us to face the assembled court. Hundreds of the most powerful wolves in the kingdom looked on, their expressions a mix of shock, respect, fear, and dawning acceptance. Cyrus did not speak to them. He turned to me. He released my arm and took both of my hands in his. His golden eyes held mine, and in them I saw not just the king, but the man who had climbed a waterfall for a whisper. The storm had passed, and in its wake was a calm so deep it felt like forever. "Elara Gray," he said, and his voice, though quiet, filled the universe. My wolf knew you from the first scent on the wind. My soul recognized yours in the dark of a cave. I do not offer you a crown, for you have already forged your own. I do not offer you protection, for you are my equal in strength. I offer you my heart, my fidelity, my forever. Will you stand beside me, not as my Omega, but as my Luna, my queen, my mate? He wasn't kneeling, he was standing before me as an equal, asking. The gesture undid me. The last of my defenses crumbled. The fear, the unworthiness, the echoes of Celeste's taunts, they evaporated under the sure, fierce love in his gaze. Tears, warm and silent, spilled down my cheeks. I was not the ghost. I was not the curse. I was Elara, and I was his. Yes, I said, the word of vow, a prayer, a beginning. A sound went through the crowd, not a cheer, but a deep, resonant exhale of awe and approval. As Cyrus lifted our joined hands, the hall erupted in a roar that shook the stars in the crystal ceiling. But I heard none of it. I only heard the beating of his heart, a steady, powerful rhythm that promised home and peace and a love that had burned the world down just to find me.
He said, his voice the calm at the eye of the storm. But she will show you, so that every soul here understands the corruption that has festered in Moonstone. He looked at me, and in his golden eyes I saw not a command, but absolute faith. Show them who you are. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I reached inward, into the hollow, aching space where Lyra had been silenced. She wasn't gone. The poison had muffled her, shoved her deep, but the bond was a root that went to the very core of my soul, and my core was not just Omega, it was Purifier. My eyes began to glow, not with the fiery gold of an alpha, but with a cool, blinding, silvery white light, the light of the full moon on new snow, the light of truth. No, Celeste whispered, true terror finally cracking her facade. She raised her hands, not in surrender, but in a warding gesture, purple energy crackling around her fingers. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said, and my voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. I raised my own hands, palms facing Kieran. I am purifying what you have poisoned. A beam of pure, concentrated white light erupted from my palms. It was not hot, but cold and clarifying. It struck Kieran in the center of his chest. He screamed. It was a sound of unbearable agony, of something being violently torn from him. He arched backward, and from his mouth, his nose, his eyes, thick black smoke poured forth. It writhed in the air, forming shapes, clawed hands, screaming faces, the twisted echo of Celeste's purple magic, before disintegrating under the relentless, cleansing power of my light. When the beam ceased and the smoke cleared, Kieran collapsed to his knees, retching. He looked up, his chest heaving, and his eyes were clear. The fog was gone. The hollow, sickly gray was replaced with the warm, confused, horrified hazel I remembered. He blinked, looking at Celeste, then at his own trembling hands, then at me. Celeste, he croaked, his voice rusty but his own. You put it in my tea. The night of the beta ceremony. You made me forget her. You made me love you. The confession, raw and unfiltered, was the final damning proof. The great hall was utterly, profoundly silent. Chapter 9. The Unmasking. The silence was a living thing, heavy and waiting. All eyes were locked on Celeste. The beautiful, tragic mask was gone, stripped away by Kieran's words and the evidence of the purifying light that still faintly haloed my hands. What remained was a face twisted with a hatred so pure it was almost fascinating. She looked from Kieran's clear, accusing eyes to the horrified disgust on my father's face, to the sea of cold, judging alpha stares. She was cornered, and a cornered predator is at its most dangerous. So what?
Her voice was a shard of broken glass, sharp and shocking in the quiet. She straightened her spine, throwing off the pretense of the victim. The violet energy, no longer hidden, crackled around her hands, licking up her arms like malevolent fire. She did what was necessary. I was the golden one, the strong one. I was destined for a crown, not to play second to a mewling, white-furred freak. She spat the last word at me, her composure incinerated by rage. I found power in the old places, when Father's teachings felt like chains. The book showed me the truth, that strength isn't given, it's taken, and I took it. I took Kieran. I took your place. I would have taken the king, and I would have ruled this kingdom from the shadows, where true power resides. Her wild gaze swung to Cyrus. And you chose this pale, purifying nothing over a queen of real power? Cyrus didn't flinch. He regarded her with a look of utter, pitiless contempt. You mistake corruption for strength. You are a parasite who feasts on the will of others. She, he said, gesturing to me, without looking away from Celeste, is a cleansing rain after a long drought. There is no comparison. Celeste's laughter was a dry, hacking sound. Cleansing rain. She's a weapon, a mindless tool of so-called pure light. Do you think she loves you, King? The bond forced her. She would have lived in her cave forever if you hadn't dragged her out. She is bound to you by biology, not choice. Her words were meant to wound, to plant doubt. They glanced off the unshakable certainty I saw in Cyrus's eyes, but they found a mark in my own heart, pricking old insecurities. I would have, I said, my voice quiet but carrying. Everyone turned to me. I would have lived in the caves forever. I was content in my solitude. The bond, it terrified me. It still does. I took a step toward her, toward the sister who had been my first and greatest monster. Because it is real. It is a choice that fate presents, and it is a terrifying one, to tie your soul to another's. You wouldn't understand that. You only understand possession. You don't want a mate. You want a puppet. You don't want a kingdom. You want a throne of bones. Her face contorted. You sanctimonious little... If I can't have it, then no one will. With a speed fueled by dark energy, she moved, but not toward me, not toward Cyrus. She reached into the folds of her violet ground and pulled forth the object of her power, a small, ancient-looking book bound in what appeared to be tarnished silver and stained, cracked leather. It pulsed with a sickly purple light, and in her other hand a dagger appeared, its blade coated in the same glowing green substance as the vial, concentrated, enchanted wolfsbane. She was a blur of violet and malice. She didn't aim for my heart. She aimed for the book itself, the dagger poised to plunge into its pages. If my magic dies, I'll take every soul it's touched with me, she screeched. A suicide spell, a magical detonation that would kill Kieran and who knows how many others in the pack she'd subtly influenced. No, Kieran shouted, lurching forward, but he was too weak, too far. Cyrus moved. He didn't shift, he didn't roar, he simply was there, standing between Celeste and her destructive goal. His hand closed around her wrist holding the dagger with a crack that echoed like breaking stone. The dagger clattered to the floor. With his other hand, he snatched the pulsating book from her grasp. Celeste shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated loss and fury. She clawed at him, but he held her effortlessly, her dark magic sizzling harmlessly against the aura of pure, dominant alpha power that surrounded him. It was like a moth battering against a mountain. He threw the book to Torin, who caught it in a specially prepared lead-lined box, snapping the lid shut, silencing its pulse. They did not tame my wild hair. They woven it into an intricate crown of braids, leaving strands to curl freely, a testament to the wind and the wild. My gown was not the soft pastels expected of an omega. It was the color of a winter moon, a white so pure it seemed to emit its own light, crafted from layers of silk and duchess satin that whispered with every movement. The cut was severe and elegant, with a high collar that brushed my jaw and long, fitted sleeves that ended in points over my knuckles. It was not a dress meant for blending in. It was armor. It was a declaration. "It is time, my queen," Torin murmured from behind me, his voice a respectful rumble. He and Rohan were my shadows now, their loyalty transferred irrevocably from Cyrus to me. Below, the herald's staff struck the marble floor with a sound like cracking glacier. Presenting Alpha King Grey of the Moonstone Pack and his daughter, the beta female Celeste Grey. A hush, deeper than before, swallowed the music. The massive oak doors swung open. Celeste entered. She was a masterpiece of tragic elegance, dressed in a gown of deep, mournful violet, her golden hair swept into a sophisticated twist. She moved with a measured, somber grace, her head bowed just so. She played the part of the grieving sister burdened by duty to perfection. Beside him, Kieran was a pale, stiff ghost in formal wear, his eyes downcast, his movements mechanical. The sight of him, so utterly enslaved, sent a fresh wave of sorrow and fury through me. They processed toward the dais where Cyrus sat upon the obsidian throne. He was a study of contained power, dressed in immaculate black and silver, his expression one of detached, regal boredom. But I could feel the storm coiled within him, a pressure building in the room. "Your Majesty," Celeste's voice floated up, a delicate blend of reverence and sorrow, as she curtsied low. "We are humbled by your invitation in this difficult time. We have come in the hope of seeing my sister, of offering our family's comfort and support in her recovery." She lifted her tear-bright eyes, "and to formally relieve you of any burden our family's tragedy has imposed upon the crown." Cyrus didn't rise. He regarded her with the same flat disinterest one might show a mildly interesting stain on the floor. "Burden?" he echoed, his voice devoid of inflection. "The situation with Elara," Celeste said gently, as if the words pained her. "The instability, the addiction. Moonstone is prepared to take her home. We have secured a place at a most discreet and caring facility, specializing in Omega rehabilitation." She infused the last word with such pity it made my skin crawl. "The only facility your sister requires is the one standing around you," Cyrus replied, his tone conversational but with an edge that could flay skin. "She is my mate. Her place is here." Celeste's mask of grief tightened. "Your Majesty, with the greatest respect, the events at Moonstone, the Wolfsbane, surely the Council of Elders must see that her judgment is compromised for the safety of the kingdom." "I have grown weary of people citing the safety of my kingdom to me," Cyrus interrupted, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. He stood then, slowly, a mountain deciding to move. "Especially when those people reek of deceit and dark magic." The words landed in the silent hall with the weight of anvils. Celeste went very still. A flicker of real fear, sharp and panicked, flashed in her eyes before she banked it. "Dark magic, Your Majesty? I don't understand. Such accusations." "Don't you?" Cyrus descended the dais steps, his gaze fixed on Celeste. "I had my seers examine the residue on the vial. Wolfsbane, yes, but also the distinct oily signature of a compulsion charm. Someone didn't just give my mate poison, they forced her soul to drink it." The gathered alphas and dignitaries stirred, a rustle of shock and unease. Accusations of dark magic were not made lightly. "This is madness," Alpha King blustered, stepping forward. "You would defame my daughter to cover for your own mate's weakness?" "I do not cover, I expose." Cyrus stopped before them, his presence alone pushing them back a step. Then he turned his head, his gaze lifting, seeking me in the shadows of the balcony. Elara. At the sound of my name from his lips, a command and an invitation, the fear in my chest solidified into a diamond-hard resolve. I stepped out of the drapes and into the full view of the court. Gasps rippled through the hall like a shockwave. I was a ghost made flesh, a myth stepped from legend. The white gown, the wild hair, the scars, I was not the broken Omega they expected. I walked with a straight spine, my eyes not on the crowd, but on my sister. Celeste's face drained of all color, her perfect composure shattered into jagged pieces of disbelief and dawning terror. Elara, you're supposed to be what, Celeste? I asked, my voice clear and carrying in the perfect acoustics of the hall as I began my descent down the grand staircase. Each step was measured, echoing. Drugged into oblivion, broken beyond repair, or safely dead so you could take what never was yours. "She's delirious," Celeste shrieked, the sound shrill against the marble. "The trauma, the drugs, she's inventing monsters." I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted before me, creating a path between my sister and me. The only monster here is the one who uses blood and fear as puppeteer's strings. I turned my gaze to Kieran. He was staring at me, a tremor running through him. "Kieran," I said, and I poured every ounce of the alpha strength I was learning to wield into his name, not to command, but to reach. "Look at me." His head jerked up, his eyes, those hollow pits, met mine. I saw the war within them, the fog of magic versus the dregs of the man he once was. "Don't speak to him," Celeste hissed, moving to stand in front of him, a shield of velvet and malice. She grabbed his arm, and I saw it, the faintest wisp of violet energy, like diseased lightning, jump from her fingers to his skin. "There." I didn't shout. I pointed, my finger steady as a blade, aimed at that point of contact. "Blood magic," I stated, my voice ringing with a certainty that silenced the last whispers. The crowd recoiled as if from a physical blow. Gasps turned to murmurs of horror. Dark magic was a taboo, a sickness. "Prove it," my father roared, his face purple with rage and shame. "You have accused my daughter of the highest treason. Show us your proof, or be branded a liar and a madwoman." Cyrus moved to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, a wall of silent support. "She doesn't need to prove it to you." The days that followed were a whirlwind, a blur of light and ceremony conducted in a new, quiet language that existed only between Cyrus and me. There were no grand pronouncements to the world yet, no official coronation. That would come. First was healing. My physical strength returned slowly, nurtured by the clean air of Astral Peak and the careful attentions of the royal healers. But the true healing was of the spirit. Lyra, my beautiful white wolf, began to stir from her poisoned slumber. She was weak, her presence in my mind a faint, silvery glimmer rather than a radiant moon, but she was there, and with Cyrus's patient, steady presence, a constant, calming storm beside me, she grew stronger each day. We spent hours in his private solar, a room of glass and stone that hung over the edge of the world. We spoke of everything and nothing, of my years in the caves, the fish I'd named, the way the moss grew in spiral patterns, of his 10 years of silent searching, the weight of the crown, the loneliness of being a peak that no other mountain could match. We did not kiss, we did not embrace with the passion the world expected. Our intimacy was built in the quiet spaces, his hand covering mine on the arm of a chair, our shoulders brushing as we looked out at the sunrise, the way he would always, without fail, place a cup of steaming herbal tea in my hands when the mountain chill seeped into the room. It was a halal courtship, built on respect, on the slow, deliberate weaving of two solitary souls into a single, unbreakable tapestry. It was more profound than any physical touch could ever be. One evening, as the sun painted the clouds in shades of violet and gold, he led me to the palace gardens, a miraculous terraced paradise clinging to the mountainside, filled with night-blooming flowers that glowed in the twilight. "The council," he began, his voice thoughtful as we walked along a path of crushed moonstone that glittered underfoot. "They are convinced. Your actions at the Solstice ball, your strength, your purity of purpose, they silenced the last of the doubters. Even the old traditionalists who grumbled about an Omega Queen now speak of the purifying Luna with a sense of awe." A faint smile touched his lips. "They are also terrified of you, which is, admittedly, useful." I smiled back, a real, easy smile that still felt strange on my face. "I don't wish to be feared." "You aren't," he said, stopping to look at me. "You are revered. The people have heard the stories, the Omega who survived the Blackwood, who purified a beta of dark magic, who banished corruption with words instead of claws. They are calling for your coronation. They want to see their queen." A flutter of nervousness, old and familiar, stirred in my chest. "I'm not what they imagine. I'm not regal." "You are the most regal creature I have ever known," he said, his voice dropping, intense. "Regality isn't about gowns or gestures. It is about bearing the weight of your truth with grace. And you, Elara, carry the weight of a forgotten moon. It is a breathtaking thing to witness." He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. My breath caught. He withdrew not a ring, but a necklace, a delicate chain of platinum from which hung a pendant, a single teardrop-shaped moonstone, uncut and raw, cradled in a claw-like setting of the same metal. It glowed with a soft internal light, as if holding a piece of the moon itself. "This," he said, holding it up, the stone catching the last of the sunside, "is my mother's. She was a seer. She told me before she passed that I would know my queen not by her roar, but by her silence, not by her power, but by her purity. She said I would find her in a forgotten place, and that she would wear the light of the moon as her pelt." His eyes were luminous in the growing dark. "I thought it a metaphor, until I saw a white wolf fleeing into a cave." Tears pricked my eyes. "Cyrus." "This is not a binding," he said softly, moving behind me. I lifted my hair, and he fastened the clasp. The cool stone settled against my skin, right over my heart, and a wave of warmth, of profound rightness spread through me. It felt like a blessing, an acceptance. "This is a promise that I see you, all of you, the survivor, the purifier, the woman, my equal, my queen." I turned to face him, my hand clutching the pendant. The emotion was a vast, swelling ocean inside me. Gratitude, love, a sense of belonging so deep it rooted me to the earth. "I don't have a grand gift for you, only my loyalty, my trust, and my heart. It's a little scarred, and it's been hiding for a long time, but it is yours." He brought my hand, the one clutching the pendant, to his lips. He did not kiss it. He pressed his forehead against my knuckles, a gesture of such profound devotion it stole my breath. "It is the only treasure I have ever wanted," he murmured against my skin. The coronation was set for the next full moon. The great hall was transformed, no longer a viper's nest, a temple of ice and light. Silvery banners depicting the mountain and star sigil hung between columns carved to look like frosted trees. The air smelled of night-blooming jasmine and clean snow. Every noble, every ambassador, every pack Alpha and Luna from across the kingdom was there, a sea of expectant faces. I stood in an antechamber, my heart a wild thing. My gown was new, a collaborative creation between the royal tailors and myself. It was white, of course, but woven with threads of metallic silver that caught the light, and a deep celestial blue underskirt that peeked through like the night sky behind clouds. It was simpler than the solstice gown, more majestic. My hair was down, a cascade of waves, with only a few small braids holding it back from my face. The moonstone pendant rested on my chest, glowing softly. Torin entered and bowed. "It is time, Your Majesty." I nodded, unable to speak. He offered his arm, and I took it, my fingers cold. The doors before me swung open. A pathway of pure white velvet led between the assembled crowd, all the way to the dais where the obsidian throne sat. And standing before it, not on it, was Cyrus. He was dressed in formal black, a cloak of deep blue cloth lined with silver fur draped from his shoulders. He watched me walk towards him, and his expression was one of such unveiled pride and awe that my nerves began to settle, replaced by a rising tide of certainty. The walk felt endless and instantaneous. I saw faces I recognized, some elders from Moonstone, looking chastened and respectful, diplomats from the northern clans, their eyes sharp with assessment. I saw no hatred.
I saw curiosity, hope, and in many a dawning wonder. I reached the dais. Cyrus stepped forward and took both my hands. He turned us to face the crowd. The High Elder, the oldest living wolf in the kingdom, stepped forward, his voice amplified by the hall's acoustics. "We gather under the witness of the full moon to crown a queen, not by birthright, but by divine right, by strength forged in solitude, by purity proven in fire, by a heart that commands not through fear, but through cleansing light." He lifted a crown from a velvet cushion. It was not a heavy golden thing. It was a circlet of woven platinum set with diamonds that shone like captured starlight, and at its center, a single brilliant moonstone that matched my pendant. "Elara of the White Wolf," the elder intoned. "Daughter of Moonstone, purifier of the realm, fated mate to Alpha King Cyrus Thorn, do you swear to guard this kingdom with your light, to lead with compassion, to judge with wisdom, and to stand beside your king as his equal in all things?" I looked at Cyrus. His hands tightened on mine. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the future I had never dared to imagine. My voice, when it came, was clear and strong, echoing to the farthest corners of the hall. "I swear it." "Then, by the authority of the moon and the will of the people," the elder said, his own voice thick with emotion, "I crown you Luna Elara, queen of the mountain kingdom, mistress of astral peak and light of the north." He placed the circlet upon my head. It was light, but its weight was the weight of a promise. As it settled, a collective sigh swept the room, followed by a roar of approval that was deafening. Shouts of "Long live Queen Elara" and "Long live the king" thundered against the stone. Cyrus turned to me, his golden eyes shining. He leaned close, his words for me alone amidst the din. "My queen," he whispered, the words a vow and a caress. He did not kiss me. Instead, he lifted our joined hands high, presenting us to the kingdom, king and queen, storm and starlight, two halves of a single, unbreakable whole. As the cheers washed over us, I knew my journey from the shadows was complete. I was no longer the Omega hiding behind the falls. I was the Luna crowned in moonlight. The age of the White Wolf had begun, not as a curse, but as a beacon, and it was only the beginning. Chapter 11. The Weight of the Crown. The roar of the crowd was a tidal wave that receded slowly, leaving in its wake a profound and echoing silence within me. The circlet on my head was a whisper of cool metal, a tangible symbol of a reality I still struggled to grasp. Queen, Luna, the words buzzed in my mind, unfamiliar and immense. Cyrus led me from the dais, his hand a steady anchor on the small of my back, guiding me through a blur of bowed heads and murmured congratulations. The faces were a sea of smiles, but my newly sharpened senses caught the subtler currents beneath, the calculating glint in an ambassador's eye, the hesitant curiosity of a stern-faced elder, the genuine warmth from a young Luna who looked at me with something like hope. We reached the royal receiving hall, a quieter, more intimate space where the highest-ranking guests would offer their formal pledges. The first to approach was Alpha King Cyrus, my father. He looked older. The rigid pride that had always armored him was gone, replaced by a deep, weary shame that bowed his shoulders. He stopped before us, and for a long moment he could not meet my eyes. He looked at the moonstone on my chest, at the crown in my hair, and then his gaze dropped to the floor. "Your Majesties," he began, his voice gravelly. He cleared his throat. "King Cyrus, Queen Elara." My title on his lips was a strange, jarring sound. He finally lifted his eyes to mine, and what I saw there was not the dismissive opacity I was used to, but a raw, painful clarity. "I come to offer the formal allegiance of the Moonstone Pack, and to beg your forgiveness." The hall was not silent. Soft conversations hummed around us, but in the space between my father and me, the world narrowed to a pinpoint. Cyrus's hand pressed gently against my back, a steady anchor of his support, but he did not speak. This was my judgment to give. "Forgiveness is not a thing to be begged at a coronation, Father," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. I saw him flinch at the word father. "It is a seed that must be planted in truth and watered with time. Moonstone's allegiance is welcome. Your personal forgiveness, that is a path we must walk, and its length is unknown to me." It was not the absolution he perhaps hoped for, but it was not a dismissal. It was honesty, the most I could offer. His eyes glistened, and he gave a slow, heavy nod. "I will walk it, for however long it takes. I was blind, Elara. I let my ambition for a perfect legacy eclipse the daughter who was perfect in her own true way. I failed you. I acknowledge that failure before your court and before the moon." The admission cost him. I could see it in his tremor of hands, in the way his jaw worked. The part of me that was still the little girl hiding in the West Wing ached to run to him, to offer comfort. But the woman, the queen, the survivor, held firm. His failure had nearly cost me my life. The scars, both seen and unseen, were real. "Your acknowledgement is the first step on that path," I said finally, inclining my head. "A queen's gesture, not a daughter's. Moonstone is under your stewardship. See that it heals. See that no other child is made to feel like a ghost in their own home." It was a command, softly spoken, but a command, nonetheless. He bowed deeply, lower than protocol demanded. "By my life, my queen." He moved away, a figure of profound defeat, and I felt a pang of sorrow so sharp it surprised me. Grief, I realized, not for the father I had, but for the father I had needed and never found. The line moved forward. There were pledges from the northern clans, their alphas respectful but watchful. Pledges from the Eastern Forest Alliance, their words laced with poetic references to the new moon's light. I responded with measured grace, my words careful, my posture regal. I was playing a part, and I played it well, but inside I was trembling. It was when a small, elderly Luna from a minor southern pack approached that the facade nearly cracked. She was tiny, her back bent with age, her hands gnarled, but her eyes were bright and sharp. She took my hands in hers, her skin like parchment.
"Child," she whispered, her voice like wind through dry leaves, ignoring all protocol. "I knew your grandmother, Leora. She was my dearest friend." My breath caught. "She spoke of you, even when you were just a babe in arms. She said you had old eyes. She said you carried a quiet magic." The old Luna's grip tightened. She would be weeping with pride today, not for the crown, for the courage. You wear your truth like she wore her shawls, with quiet grace that hides immense strength. Do not let them, she glanced subtly at the watching dignitaries, steal that quiet from you. A kingdom needs a storm like your king, but it also needs the steady, gentle light of the moon to see by. Be that light. Tears, hot and sudden, flooded my eyes. I could not stop them. They spilled over, tracing warm paths down my cheeks. This was the first connection, the first unconditional acknowledgement of who I was, tied to the only person who had ever loved me freely. It undid me. "Thank you," I choked out, squeezing her hands. It was all I could manage. She patted my hand and shuffled away, leaving me emotionally exposed in the center of the room. I felt the weight of 100 stares, saw the surprise at my public tears. A queen was not supposed to cry. A queen was supposed to be marble. Then Cyrus was there. He didn't try to hide my tears or hurry me away. He simply turned his body slightly, shielding me from the most direct gazes, and his thumb brushed the wetness from my cheek. His touch was not one of chastisement, but of understanding. "The strongest foundations," he murmured, his voice a low rumble for my ears alone, "are laid with water as well as stone. Let them see your heart, Elara. It is your greatest power." His words were a balm. I drew a shaky breath, regaining my composure, but allowing the vulnerability to remain in my eyes. I was not marble. I was a woman who had loved and lost and fought and found her way home. Let them see it. Later, in the solitude of our private terrace, the sounds of the celebration a distant murmur below, the full weight of the day crashed upon me. I stood at the railing, the crown heavy on my brow, the vast, star-dusted abyss of the mountain night yawning before me. The isolation was familiar, but this time it was not born of fear. It was the necessary solitude of bearing a new self. "It is overwhelming," he said, not a question, as he came to stand beside me, a solid, warm presence in the cool dark. "I feel like an imposter," I confessed, the words a secret to the stars. "All those people seeing a queen, but I'm just Elara, the girl from the cave. I don't know the protocols, the politics, the history." "You know the heart of it. You know what it is to be overlooked, to be afraid, to fight for your right to simply be. That is what a ruler needs to know. The rest, the protocols, the treaties, the histories, those are just tools. I have spent a lifetime mastering the tools. You have mastered the purpose. Together, we are complete. My storm provides the strength, the boundary, the defense. Your light provides the guidance, the compassion, the reason for it all. Do you understand? I have been a king defending a mountain. With you, I am a king building a sanctuary." The depth of his vision, his utter faith in our partnership, stole the air from my lungs. He saw not a weakness in my inexperience, but a complementary strength. He saw a queen. What if I fail? The fear was a child's whisper. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of the platinum circlet. Then we fail together, and we rise together. You are not alone on this peak anymore, Elara. You will never be alone again. I looked up at him, at the man who had shattered my solitude not with force, but with an unshakable certainty that I belonged. The fear didn't vanish, but it shrank, put into perspective by the immensity of his trust. The crown's weight shifted, becoming not a burden, but a responsibility shared. I leaned my head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and reliance. He rested his cheek against my hair. We stood in silence, two pillars under the moon, the king of storms and the queen of silent light, learning the first quiet notes of our shared reign. Chapter 12. Whispers in the Sanctum. The royal palace of Astral Peak was not just a fortress, it was a living entity of ancient stone and older magic. In the weeks following the coronation, as the whirlwind of ceremonies subsided and the reality of rule settled into a daily rhythm, I began to explore my new home. Cyrus was often occupied with the intricate machinery of governance, meetings with generals, consultations with engineers about border fortifications, hearings with trade delegates whose voices rose and fell like competing tides in his council chambers. I did not resent his absence. It gave me space to breathe, to find my own footing. My official duties began lightly, reviewing petitions from common folk, which Cyrus insisted bypass the usual bureaucratic filters and come directly to me, meeting with the heads of the palace staff, and beginning my long, daunting education in kingdom history with a patient, elderly archivist named Silas. But my true sanctuary, the place where my soul felt most at peace, was the royal sanctum. It was a place few were permitted to enter, a vast circular chamber deep in the heart of the mountain, beneath the palace foundations. Its walls were natural, unhewn rock, glittering with embedded crystals that caught the light from a single, mysterious shaft in the ceiling that somehow, even deep underground, always held a beam of moonlight or sunlight. In the center of the room lay a tranquil, perfectly circular pool, its water so clear and still it seemed like a disk of polished air. This was a place of deep, quiet magic, older than the kingdom itself. It was where the royal seers had once communed with the lunar currents, where kings had come for silent counsel. It was, Silas told me with reverence, a place of truth. It reflected not your face, but the state of your spirit. I came here often, usually at night when the palace slept. I would sit on the smooth stone ledge by the pool, let the profound silence soak into my bones, and simply be. Here I wasn't the White Queen or the Purifier, I was just Elara, the girl from the cave. I didn't know the protocols, the politics, the history.
I sat by the pool, trailing my fingers in the water. It was warm, like blood, yet perfectly clear. "Show me," I whispered, not truly expecting an answer, just voicing the anxiety. "What is stirring in the east?" I stared into the water's depths. At first, I saw only the reflected glitter of the crystal walls. Then the image shifted, swirled. My own reflection faded, replaced not by a vision, but by a sensation. A deep, rhythmic thrum, like a gigantic, slumbering heart beating far below the earth. It was not menacing, but it was immensely powerful, and it felt wounded. A profound sense of sorrow,
ancient and weary, seeped from the water into my fingertips, up my arm and settled in my own heart. A tear I did not understand fell from my eye and rippled the pool's surface, breaking the connection. I gasped, pulling my hand back. The sorrow lingered, a phantom ache. What was that? The land is speaking to you. I jumped. Cyrus stood at the entrance to the sanctum, his form a silhouette against the softer light of the outer corridor. He approached, his boots silent on the stone. He wasn't surprised to find me here. He seemed to know it called to me. I felt a heartbeat, I said, my voice unsteady, and a sadness so deep it felt older than time. He nodded, coming to sit beside me. He didn't touch the water. The heart of the mountain. It is what gives Astral Peak its name. It is the source of the subtle magic that permeates this place, that allows the seers their sight, that strengthens the royal bloodline. My forebears believed it was the physical heart of the first great wolf spirit who shaped these peaks. He looked into the pool, his reflection grave. For generations, the kings of my line have been able to feel its pulse. It is steady, strong, a reassurance. But this wasn't just a pulse, I insisted, the echo of the sorrow making my chest tight. It was in pain. Cyrus was silent for a long moment. I have felt a dissonance, a faint off rhythm, like a song played slightly out of key. I attributed it to the recent turmoil, to the dark magic Celeste wielded. Its echo might have disturbed the deeper harmonies. He looked at me, his gaze intense. But I have never felt its sorrow. That is a new note, and you felt it on your first true touch. The reports from the east, I said, the pieces connecting in a flash of intuition. The mists, the disorientation, the drained life. It's not just rogue activity, it's a symptom. Something is wrong with the land itself. Something is hurting the heart. The implication was terrifying. If the heart of the mountain was the wellspring of the kingdom's stability and magic, its sickness could mean more than border skirmishes. It could mean blighted crops, weakening wolves, a slow unraveling of the very natural order. The council will demand proof, Cyrus said, his voice grim. They will call it the fanciful worry of a new queen, and Omega's sensitivity mistaken for insight. A spark of defiance, the same one that had kept me alive in the caves, ignited. Then we will find proof, not for the council, for the kingdom. If the land is sick, we must heal it. That is the first duty of a ruler, is it not? To protect the people by protecting the earth they walk on. A slow, fierce pride spread across Cyrus's face. It was the look he'd given me in the cave when I'd stood my ground. That is exactly the duty of a ruler, and a queen. He stood, offering me his hand. Tomorrow we ride for the eastern border, not with a full royal retinue, with a small, trusted guard. We see for ourselves. You will be my eyes, Elara. You will listen to what the land has to say. The weight of the mission settled on me, but it was a weight I chose to carry. This was not about protocol or politics. This was about healing. This was a purpose that sang to the core of who I was, the purifier. As we left the sanctum, the echo of that sorrowful heartbeat stayed with me, but now it was mingled with a new resolve. The land was whispering its pain, and for the first time it had a queen who was willing to listen. Chapter 13. The Blighted Grove. The journey to the eastern marches was a descent from crystalline air into something thicker, heavier. We rode for 3 days, Cyrus, myself, Torin, Rohan, and a handful of Cyrus's most trusted trackers. As we left the stark, beautiful brutality of the high peaks, the pine forests should have deepened, growing lush and vibrant. Instead, a pall seemed to hang over the land. It was subtle at first. The songs of birds were fewer, their melodies litless. The streams we crossed ran clear, but with a faint metallic scent that wasn't natural. The very light filtering through the canopy seemed tinged with a sickly yellow-green, like an old bruise. My sense of disquiet grew with every mile. Lyra, growing stronger within me each day, was agitated. She didn't whine or pull, she was just watchful, still, a hunter sensing a poison in the wind. Cyrus noticed it too. His keen eyes missed nothing, the way a wolf in our party would suddenly shake its head as if dislodging a fly, the unnatural quiet of a glade that should have been teeming with life. He said little, but his expression grew grimmer, the set of his shoulders more rigid. The reports had not done the reality justice. On the afternoon of the third day, we reached the village of Pine Watch, the last settled outpost before the true wilds of the Blackwood border. The villagers, a mix of hardy woodsmen and their families, gathered anxiously in the central clearing. Their alpha, a grisly man named Boren with a deep scar across his cheek, stepped forward and bowed low. King Cyrus, Queen Elara, we are honored and shamed that you've come to see our trouble. There is no shame in facing a threat you did not create, Alpha Boren, Cyrus said, his voice carrying a calm authority that eased the visible tension in the crowd. Tell us what you see. Boren gestured east, towards a ridge of dark trees. It comes from the old grove, the Elder Grove. It's always been a place of power, but good power. Our ancestors are buried there. A moon ago, the mists started. Not natural fog. This stuff, it clings. It gets in your nose, your mouth, makes you see things that aren't there, hear whispers. 2 of my best hunters wandered in a week past. We found them yesterday on the edge of the village. They were empty, eyes blank, wolves silent inside them, like their souls had been sucked dry. His voice broke. And the land, the berries are bitter now, the game tastes wrong, the children have nightmares.
A young woman pushed forward, a babe on her hip. "Please, your majesty," she said to me, her eyes desperate. "My little one, she won't stop crying. She points to the east and screams. She's never done that before." A cold certainty crystallized within me. This was no ordinary sickness. This was a wound. The sorrow I'd felt in the sanctum was leaking out here, festering into something toxic. "We need to see the grove," I said before Cyrus could speak. Boren's eyes widened in fear. "My queen, it's not safe. The mists are thickest there." "Which is why we must go," Cyrus said, supporting me. "Lead us to the edge. We go no further than necessary." An hour later, we stood at the tree line overlooking a valley. Below, shrouded in a swirling, opalescent mist that seemed to pulse with a faint, unhealthy light, was the Elder Grove. Even from this distance, the wrongness was a physical blow. The ancient trees, which should have been towering and proud, were twisted, their branches clutching at the sky like skeletal fingers. No birds called, no insects hummed. The silence was a roar. And the sorrow, it washed over me in a wave so potent it brought tears to my eyes. It was the same profound, ancient grief from the Sanctum pool, but here it was twisted with anger, with pain, with a desperate, corrupted loneliness. "It's in pain," I whispered, my hand going to the moonstone pendant, which felt warm against my skin. Terrible, screaming pain. Cyrus placed a hand on my shoulder. "Can you tell where it's coming from? The source?" I closed my eyes, letting my senses stretch out, not with sight or smell, but with that new, fragile connection to the land's spirit. I felt the sickly pull of the mist, the throbbing ache from the heart of the grove, and then I felt something else, a presence, not a wolf, something older, rooted, and utterly, devastatingly mournful. "There," I said,
pointing to the very center of the mist-shrouded grove. "The eldest tree, it's the anchor, and it's dying, and its death is poisoning everything." Just then, the mist at the edge of the grove writhed. Figures emerged. Not rogues, the two missing hunters Boren had described. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, their eyes milky white and vacant. They made no sound, but their mouths were open in silent screams. Behind them, the mist coalesced, forming vague, terrifying shapes. Wolves with too many legs, faces with glowing eyes, reflections of the nightmares plaguing the village children. Torin and Rohan shifted instantly, positioning themselves between us and the advancing figures. A low growl rumbled from Cyrus's chest, but I stepped forward past them. "Elara!" Cyrus's warning was sharp. "They're not attacking," I said, my voice trembling but clear. I could feel it. These men, the mist shapes, they weren't malice, they were manifestations, echoes of the grove's agony. I walked toward the first hunter. He stopped, his head tilting. I raised my hands, not in a threat, but in the same gesture I'd used to purify Kieran. I didn't summon the blazing white light. I called for something softer, gentler. The light of the moon on a troubled sea, a healing light. A soft, silvery glow emanated from my palms, washing over the hunter. He shuddered. The milky whiteness in his eyes receded, just for a moment, and I saw a flash of sheer, unimaginable terror before the vacancy swallowed him again. But it was enough. The mist shape behind him wavered and dissolved. It wasn't a purification, it was a momentary soothing. The sickness was too deep, too rooted in the land itself. To heal this, I would need to go to the source, to the dying heart tree in the center of the blight. I turned back to Cyrus, my face pale. "We can't fight this with claws. The grove itself is wounded. We have to heal the wound." Cyrus looked from the tormented, hollow men at the mist's edge to my determined face. He saw the impossibility of the task. He saw the danger, but he also saw the truth in my words. The land was screaming, and I was the only one who could hear its language. "How?" he asked, the single word heavy with fear for me. I looked at the pulsating, sickly heart of the mist, the place where the ancient sorrow was a physical force. Dread, cold and sharp, coiled in my stomach, but beneath it was a steadier pulse. Purpose. "I have to go in there," I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of a vow. "I have to touch the heart of the pain." The silence that followed my words was absolute. Even the unnatural whispering rustle of the blighted mist seemed to hold its breath. Torin and Rohan had shifted back to human form, their faces etched with a stark, protective horror. Boren and his villagers stared at me as if I had just announced I would walk into a volcano. The two hollowed hunters stood like silent, terrible sentinels at the mist's edge. Cyrus did not shout, he did not argue, he simply looked at me, and in his golden eyes I saw a storm of conflict so vast it threatened to drown me. I saw the king who knew his duty was to protect his queen at all costs. I saw the man whose soul had just found its other half, faced with the prospect of watching her walk into a consuming darkness. And I saw the Alpha who understood, on a level deeper than reason, that I was right. He stepped close, his voice a low, raw vibration meant only to me. "Elara, what you are asking, that mist, that sorrow you feel, it is a spiritual poison. It hollowed out trained hunters. Your light is new, untested against something of this scale." His hand came up, cupping my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that felt like a farewell. "I can't lose you, not now, not ever." The fear in his voice, so rarely shown, was a blade twisting in my heart. I leaned into his touch, drawing strength from its warmth. "You won't lose me," I whispered, forcing conviction into the words. "But if we do nothing, we will lose everything. The village, the borderlands, maybe in time, the heart of the mountain itself. The kingdom will sicken from the edges inward. I can feel it, Cyrus. This isn't an invasion, it's an infection, and I looked down at my hands, where a faint silver glow still lingered from my attempt to soothe the hunter. I have the only one who can reach it, not to fight it, to understand it, to heal it. I saw the moment he surrendered, not to fear, but to faith. His jaw clenched, the muscle jumping. He closed his eyes for a brief second, and when he opened them, the storm had been banked, replaced by a fierce, desperate resolve. "Then I am coming with you."
No. My refusal was instant, firm. Your aura, it's a storm. It's power, dominance. That's what this place is reacting against. It's a wounded animal lashing out. If you go in there with all your alpha force, it will see you as a threat. It might lash out harder, or worse, retreat deeper into its sickness. I have to go as I am, an omega, a listener, a friend. The truth of it hung between us, cruel and undeniable. He was the shield, but I was the healer. He could not walk this path for me. A ragged breath escaped him. He pressed his forehead to mine, our crowns, his of obsidian and silver, mine of platinum and moonlight, touching with a soft clink. "You will take Torin and Rohan to the edge. No further. You will stay in sight for as long as possible, and you will come back to me." It was not a request. It was a command woven from love and dread. "You will come back." "I will come back," I promised, sealing the vow with the press of my palm against his chest, feeling the fierce, rapid beat of his heart. Minutes later, I stood alone at the true threshold, where solid ground gave way to the swirling, opalescent mist. Torin and Rohan were positioned 10 paces behind me, their bodies tense, their faces grim. Cyrus stood further back, a statue of contained agony, his gaze a physical weight on my back. I took a final steadying breath. The air here tasted of damp earth and ozone, and beneath it that cloying, metallic sorrow. I called to Lyra, not to shift, but for her presence. She stirred within me, a silvery thread of courage in the dark. "We go together," I thought to her, "to quiet the hurting place." I stepped into the mist. It was like walking into a cold, clinging web. The mist itself seemed alive, brushing against my skin with a whisper that was not sound, but feeling, a cascade of fragmented emotions, despair, loneliness, a betrayal so old that it had turned to stone. The further I walked, the denser it became, muting the light until I moved in a twilight world of shifting gray and green. The twisted, skeletal trees loomed like ghosts. The whispers grew louder, not in my ears, but in my mind. Alone, forgotten, betrayed. They were the grove's thoughts bleeding out into the world. Images flashed behind my eyes, a great luminous tree, its roots drinking from a deep silver spring, a shadow falling over it, a blade not of metal, but of greedy, draining magic severing its connection to the spring, the long, slow centuries of thirst and fading. I understood. The Elder Grove wasn't just a sacred place, it was a nexus, a living channel between the surface world and the deep, nourishing magic of the heart of the mountain. Someone, centuries ago, had cut it, not to destroy the heart, but to steal its energy, diverting it for some forgotten, selfish purpose. The grove had been slowly dying of thirst ever since, and its prolonged, agonizing death throes were poisoning the land. Tears streamed down my face, hot against the chill of the mist.
This wasn't malice, it was the prolonged scream of a murdered ecosystem. The rogue activity, the nightmares, the hollowed people, they were just the death rattle. "I hear you," I whispered aloud, my voice swallowed by the fog. The mist ahead swirled violently, coalescing into a form, a massive spectral wolf, its body made of that same sickly light, its eyes pits of that bottomless sorrow. It blocked my path, a guardian of the grief. I did not raise my hands in defense. I lowered them. I knelt, right there on the damp, blighted earth. I made myself small, harmless, an omega. I bowed my head. "I am not here to fight," I said, pouring every ounce of empathy I possessed into the words. "I am here to listen, to help if I can." The spectral wolf loomed over me. I could feel the cold of its breath, the ache of its centuries of solitude. It could end me with a thought. I held my breath, my heart a frantic drum. Then it did not strike. It lowered its great mist-woven head. It nudged me. The touch was freezing, filled with an immeasurable, aching need, a plea. It turned and began to pad silently deeper into the grove, looking back once as if to say, "Follow." I rose, my legs shaking, and followed the manifestation of the grove's pain. We reached the center, and there it was, the heart tree. It was larger than any tree I had ever imagined, its trunk wider than a house, but it was a monument to devastation. Its bark was blackened and peeling, oozing a sap that was clear and smelled of tears. Its few remaining leaves were brittle, gray things, and at its base I could see it, a deep, ugly scar in the earth, a wound that never healed, where the silver spring had been severed. From that scar the sickly mist seeped like blood from a fatal wound. The sorrow here was a physical pressure, a weight that wanted to crush my lungs, to extinguish the light inside me. Lyra whined softly in my mind, pressing close to my spirit for warmth. The spectral wolf dissipated, its energy flowing back into the weeping tree. I was alone with the source of the blight. This was it, the moment. I had no grand plan, no ancient spell. I only had what I was, an omega with a purifying light, a woman who understood what it was to be cut off, to thirst for connection. I walked to the base of the great tree. I placed my hands, palm flat, against its cold, dying bark. I closed my eyes, and I let myself feel. I opened the gates inside me, not to push my light out, but to draw the tree's agony in. I let its centuries of loneliness, its betrayal, its desperate thirst flood into me. It was a torrent of pain, a tsunami of despair that threatened to snap my mind. I cried out, a sound lost in the mist as the weight of ages bore down on my soul. I felt its roots, once deep and strong, now brittle and shallow, searching, always searching for the water that was stolen. I felt its memories of birdsong and dappled light, now just fading echoes. It was too much. I was a single, small vessel, and this was an ocean of grief. My light flickered, dimmed under the onslaught. I was being hollowed out, just like the hunters. "Cyrus," I thought, a final, anchor-like thought. "I'm sorry." Then, from the depths of that shared despair, I found not my strength, but my purpose. I was not here to take the pain away. I was here to share it, to acknowledge it, to say, "You are not alone in your hurt." With the last of my will, I did not push back. I did not purify. I connected. I poured my own memories into the tree, not the happy ones, but the true ones, the loneliness of the cave, the betrayal of my sister, the ache of being unseen, unmourned, a ghost in my own life. I showed it my thirst for the longing, my severed roots.
"I know," I poured into the dying wood. "I know what it is to be cut off. You are not alone." A shudder went through the giant tree, a tremor that shook the very ground. The torrent of agony flowing into me didn't stop, but it changed. It was no longer a hostile flood drowning me. It was emerging, a recognition. And in that moment of shared sorrow, my light changed. It was no longer a defensive, purifying silver. From the very core of my being, from the place where my pain met its pain, a new light was born. A gentle, glowing gold. Not the fierce gold of an alpha, but the warm, nurturing gold of a rising sun after a long night. The gold of compassion. The gold of a healing heart. The light flowed from my hands into the tree, not as a searing cleanse, but as a transfusion, a gift of shared understanding. It traveled down through the blackened bark, into the scarred roots, seeking the ancient severed wound. I felt it the moment the light touched the scar, a resonance, a memory of wholeness. The tree's spirit, faint and faded, grasped at the offered warmth. The oozing sap slowed, the sickly mist around us began to still, its frantic swirling calming. I was a conduit, pouring my own vitality, my hard-won empathy, into this ancient, dying being. I felt myself growing weaker, lighter, as if I were pouring my very essence into the earth. The world began to gray at the edges. This is it, I thought, with a strange detachment. This is the price. But as my consciousness began to fray, I felt something else, a trickle, then a stream, then a river of cool silver energy flowing back into me from the deep earth. It was faint, thready, but pure. It was the heart of the mountain. It had felt the connection, the healing intent. Through the mended channel of the heart tree, it was offering its own strength to sustain the healer. I was not draining myself to death. I was completing a circuit, broken for centuries, now sealed with gold and empathy. The last thing I was aware of was the sound, not a whisper, but a deep, contented sigh that rustled through the leaves of 1,000 trees, a sound of pain finally easing into sleep. And then, the darkness took me. Chapter 15. The dawn after the long night. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, a sensation of profound warmth, then a scent, clean pine and rain with no metallic taint. Finally, a sound, a steady, strong beat of a heart under my ear. I opened my eyes. I was cradled in Cyrus's arms. We were no longer in the Blighted Grove. We were on the ridge overlooking it, the morning sun just cresting the distant peaks, painting the sky in shades of rose and amber. He was staring down at me, his face haggard, etched with lines of a fear so deep that it carved canyons into his soul. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hold on me so tight it was almost painful. When he saw my eyes open, a tremor went through him, and he pulled me even closer, burying his face in my hair. No words, just a ragged, shuddering breath that spoke of a terror endured and a reprieve granted. "The grove," I rasped, my throat raw. He pulled back just enough to look at my face, his hands framing it. "Look." I turned my head. The valley below was transformed. The sickly, opalescent mist was gone. In its place, a gentle, natural morning mist curled around the bases of the trees, kissed gold by the sun. The twisted, skeletal branches were not suddenly whole. The centuries of damage remained, but the grasping, agonized angle was gone. They stood tall, if scarred, and from the highest branches of the heart tree in the center, I saw a flash of vibrant, impossible green, a single new shoot. Life had returned. On the ground near the tree line, the two hollowed hunters were sitting up, supported by Boren and his people. They looked dazed, exhausted, but their eyes were clear, focused. They were weeping, but they were present. "The mist cleared an hour after you fell. It just
dissolved. The villagers felt it immediately. The heaviness lifted. The hunters woke up, confused, but themselves. Torin and Rohan carried you out. You were so still, so pale. You've been asleep for a full day and night. Your thumb brushed over my cheekbone, his touch reverent. I thought, in the moment when the light around you faded, I thought I had let you go.
The memory of the merging, of the golden light, of the circuit completing washed over me. I didn't purify it, I whispered, understanding dawning. I couldn't. The wound was too old, too deep. It wasn't a corruption to be burned away. It was a grief to be witnessed. I shared its sorrow, and in sharing it, we healed the break. Not perfectly, but enough. The land can breathe again. He looked from the healing grove back to me, and the awe in his eyes was a brighter thing than the sunrise. You didn't just heal the land, Elara. You healed a wound in the kingdom's history. You did what no warrior king, no army, no force of will could ever do. You listened, and you loved it back to life. Tears filled my eyes again, but they were tears of release, of a joy so profound it ached. The weight was gone, not just the grove's, but my own. The lingering fear that I was a curse, a breaker of things, dissolved in the face of what I had just done. I was a healer, a mender, a queen not of dominion, but of restoration. He helped me sit up. I was weak, my body feeling hollowed out, yet strangely full of light. The villagers had seen I was awake. They didn't rush forward. They simply went to their knees, every man, woman, and child. Borin placed his fist over his heart, his head bowed. No cheers, just a silent, overwhelming gratitude that flowed up the ridge like a warm wave. The young mother with the babe stepped forward hesitantly. The child in her arms was quiet, her wide eyes looking at the rejuvenated grove with curiosity, not fear. The mother looked at me, her own eyes swimming with tears. "Thank you," she mouthed, the words soundless but deafening. This was what it meant. This was the weight and the wonder of the crown. Not the grand hall, not the pledges of nobles, but the quiet peace in a child's eyes, the return of life to a scarred land. Cyrus helped me sit up. I was weak, my body feeling hollowed out, yet strangely full of light. He helped me sit up. I was weak, my body feeling hollowed out, yet strangely full of light. Cyrus helped me to my feet, supporting most of my weight. Together, we looked out over the valley, over the kingdom waking to a new dawn, the storm and the starlight, side by side. "I told you," he said softly, his voice a promise woven into the morning air. "You are the reason for it all." I leaned into him, my strength returning sip by sip from the clean air, from his presence, from the healed pulse of the land beneath our feet. The journey here had begun with me running from a bond I feared. It had led through betrayal, poison, and the deepest darkness of a forgotten sorrow. But here, on this ridge, with the sun warming my face and my king's heart beating strong against my side, I was no longer the Omega hiding behind the falls. I was not just a queen crowned in moonlight. I was Elara. I was home, and our story, the story of the storm and the silent song, was just beginning to unfold across a healed and hopeful land.